bad thing was with this scenario was that the gymnasts were young, which suggests that they might not be able to give informed consent themselves. In that case, they would have to get a like a parent or a guardian or a doctor to say that they would be able to participate. But obviously, if they didn't get informed consent, they're not legally meant to actually volunteer and take part in the experiment. But if they were forced to do it in any way and the coaches made them do it, then this could lead to reprimand or suspension for the leader or the experiment, for the researcher, because they are illegally working with the children and they could lose their job, because obviously that is illegal. You're not meant to carry out an experiment without someone's consent, and if they are forced to do it, that's very quite clearly like inappropriate. So they would either be fined or they could have imprisonment, or they even might have ethical training on what good ethical research should include. Again, there was confidentiality problems. So one of the gymnasts made mistakes and the coaches laughed at them, and this showed them up in front of the class, and obviously that causes that's a bad ethical issue, because that causes consequences for the participants, so emotional harm, and because they're like embarrassed in front of all their classmates in their training session, but also for the researcher, again, they could go to ethical training, which shows that they on like how to deal with people who get things wrong. And also, because it's confidential, because they've made a mistake, it's appropriate to go around and tell everyone what mistake they've made. It should be kept between the coach and the participant, and just maybe give some feedback on what they've done wrong or how they could improve it, rather than going out and telling everyone and laughing and making it awkward in her class. And then the other girl landed awkwardly on her ankle and was experiencing severe discomfort, but she was not allowed to take a break, or because like she'd injured herself, she wasn't allowed to sit out. She was made to continue with the training, and obviously that's a bad thing, because you're not meant to force someone. If they're injured, it could lead to more of a permanent injury, and therefore they could sue you. So that's physical harm. Maybe emotional harm, so they might be a bit distressed that they weren't allowed to sit out. And BASES accreditation, even though they did have their BASES accreditation with them, but that could lead to that being taken away if they did not follow the rules. And obviously equality and impartiality, so they should be treated the same. They shouldn't be showed up in front of the class, and they can't excuse one girl for landing awkwardly and saying like it's their fault. They should be allowing her to sit out and taking a break and taking a rest. So scenario 3 is an investigation to determine whether the strictness of the coach determines the execution of the gymnastics routine. So the head coach allowed the girls to sit out and take breaks. However, the deputy coach was harsher and made the girls complete forfeits if they did not land a running round off. So the good things were that this was again volunteers from the classroom, and they did have there was an ethics committee meeting to approve this investigation. They did have scientific misconduct, so it was led by someone who was it was led by someone who was like almost qualified and also knew what they were talking about. But the head coach allowed the girls to sit out, and obviously that's a lot nicer and it's a lot more appropriate. And if you're nicer to someone, generally the gymnastics routine would probably have gone better. But because the other coach was harsher, and they make the girls complete forfeits. So forfeits entails things like punishments, but again, they weren't told about this. This was deception because they weren't told what kind of forfeits. So it could have been things like abuse, like punishments, like physical abuse, mental abuse, like vocal abuse. If they did not land, if they did not land the running round, so that was quite a lot of pressure for them to get it right. And obviously, if they didn't, they were abused, which is bad. It's a bad ethical issue because it causes emotional harm to the participant, like psychologically scarred, and physical harm because they are being abused, and for the researcher, possibly a prison sentence because abuse is against the law, and again, their BASES accreditation would be taken away from them. But they did do a risk assessment, and it was conducted with health and safety. So even though the girls were abused, it was a good health and safety environment for them to do it in. The last one is the effect of kinesiology tape after carrying out a maximal facilitation session. They were given a form to sign to show that all the data was confidential. However, the Gymnast Company later uploaded the results to their blog to advertise the kinesiology tape. So this was bad in a way that the Data Protection Act wasn't present, because they were given a form to sign to say that the data would be confidential. So obviously the gymnast signed it, but the company later uploaded the results, which is illegal because they have already said that they wouldn't do it. So they only uploaded it to advertise the kinesiology tape. And because that's illegal, that would lead to the participant obviously might feel a bit quite distressed. So could lead to like social harm, psychological harm to the participant, and also the researcher would be like stripped of their professional research credibility. So obviously a fine, a suspension or reprimand in that case, because they have said that they wouldn't do it, but instead they've gone and uploaded the results. So that is confidentiality. And if they were going to upload the results, they should have said that they would not upload it with their names. So it should have been anonymous. And obviously to opt out if they did not want their results at all, even if it was anonymous, to be uploaded. So that links in with confidentiality and anonymity as well. Participant disclaimer: they weren't told that there were risks in this experiment. So obviously the kinesiology tape. So for example, if they were allergic to it, they weren't told what the session entailed. They were just given a form to sign to show that the data was confidential. So again, that's deception, and they didn't really have consent or a knowledge of what the experiment involved. So again, that could lead to ethical training, their BASES accreditation being stripped because they did not follow the Nuremberg Code, and they didn't get ethical clearance, which if you don't get ethical clearance, your experiment cannot go ahead because it is considered unsafe and a bad practice and it could cause harm to people. So they weren't allowed to, you're not meant to go ahead, but obviously they did, and this is legal, so they would be probably just put straight into prison because they did break the law, full stop. But a good thing is that they did have a health and medical screening questionnaire, even though they didn't have a participant disclaimer to tell them the knowledge, but they did have a health and medical screening questionnaire to inform the researcher of whether the participants, volunteers, did have any injuries or were not able to participate for whatever reason. And I think that is the end. But that is the end of my tape.